Okay, so we're going to begin. Tonight is the third lecture of the series that we just began about the challenges, the struggles, the trials of the 21st century. Life today is very, very different than life in the past. People did have many, many troubles in the past. There was persecution, war, famine, plagues, all kinds of diseases that appear to have gone away because medicine has advanced and many of the problems of the past are no longer around. Nonetheless, every generation has its troubles. Every generation has diseases that it must conquer, that it must do its best to deal with, to heal. And ultimately, the reason why every generation needs to go through some difficulty is to recall at all times that God is the one who's in charge. And many, many times what he wants from us is sent to us through some sort of message or signal. And hopefully if we learn the lesson and we realize what he wants from us, we will be able to resolve the issues that we're confronting. Tonight's lecture is about coping with adversity. What is adversity? In Hebrew, I call it tzarot. Perhaps another word for adversity is misfortune, troubles of all kinds, hardships, affliction, and depending of your language of choice, there are various words that are used to describe difficulties that people are going through in their life. In Spanish, there's an interesting word called contratiempo, which is a kind of a mishap, things that went wrong, not the way we would have liked them to turn out. Or in Portuguese, revés or desarranjo, which are words that are describing situations that are not the way we would like them to be, things that have turned out differently. And usually, of course, they're a source of tremendous aggravation, disappointment. And when we say affliction, we also mean painful and suffering. And the reason why I titled this topic Coping with Adversity and not Overcoming Adversity, as we mentioned with depression, is because this is not about overcoming. Overcome we do with a feeling that we have. Emotions and feelings can be overcome. We can control them. We can learn to deal with them properly and subdue them. Adversity is an event in our life. We cannot control it. We can therefore not really overcome adversity. We can cope with it. We can learn to deal with it. You may be wondering, why is this part of the 21st century? I mean, this is something that existed all along. At all times there were adversities, and people had to learn to deal with them. Well, the 21st century presents tremendous challenges, as I began to say. The challenges today are greater. There's more competition. There's more demands of us. There's a greater desire to get ahead in life, much more than before. What I believe is magnifying all these difficulties and hardships is the negative press. I say negative because unfortunately in the news, there's a lot of negative news, a lot of negative press. And unfortunately, that's one of the outcomes of listening to the news. The more you listen to the news, I think you're going to be influenced by it. Not necessarily you're going to believe it, but the mood may change as a result of reading or listening to bad news. So I very much believe that in this generation that we have mass media that is communicating throughout the world, whether it is on TV or the internet or the newspaper, the tremendous amount of negative news is definitely not uplifting, not encouraging. If anything, it contributes to a lot of pessimism in people. People are losing hope. And not just losing hope, in a particular administration or government, they may be even losing hope in themselves. You know, if they read all the bad news about how there are no jobs, should they go to college? Should they still make an effort? Do they have a chance? Well, I'm not saying that you should not disclose statistics and vital information which can help people make the right choice, but it's just a fact. It's just a fact that there are certain consequences to all this negative press. Another problem in this generation is that there's weaker family support, or weaker support group, I should say. Support group is very important in certain situations where we need people to help us, to encourage us, to strengthen us, to give us direction. And that is still available. I mean, there are places where one can get help, all kinds of help. But it used to be that the family was more of a support group. The family unit is breaking down. People don't sit down to eat dinner at the same time. Kids are living all over the place. How many kids visit their elderly parents who may be in some old age home? Things are very, very different from the past. So that support group, that natural support group of the family is missing. And you probably have noticed that people in this generation are weaker physically, emotionally, and mentally. When I say mentally, I don't mean that they're not intelligent. When I say physically, they're eating junk food. I mean, they're not as strong, they're not as robust, they're not as immune to all kinds of illnesses because of not eating the right food. So that's what I mean by physically weaker. And that affects one's scholastic achievements, one's grades in school. So mentally, people are lazier too, using calculators. Emotionally too. If parents are getting divorced and the kids have to hear all the fights and experience a breakup of their family, of their home, it's terrible. And this is ongoing, and now more than ever. So as you can see, life today is very, very different in many ways than from the past. One thing is clear. Adversity, if anyone has to deal with it, he should know that it's the greatest challenge in his life. It could be the greatest challenge of his life, and therefore, one has to resolve, one has to make a decision to properly confront it. Not just to face it and worry about it or run away from it. It's a big challenge. It's the greatest challenge, perhaps. And if one does not resolve, one does not make a decision, I'm going to deal with it, he's going to be troubled by it a lot more than he should be. In other words, if we deal with it properly, it will be smaller than what it appears to be. So for that, one needs to resolve to confront it. I'm going to confront it. I'm going to deal with it. Now the question, of course, is how. First of all, I think it's important to mention at the very start what adversity is not. As I began to say before, it's an event. It's not about us. A lot of people may make the mistake when they are dealing with adversity that there's something wrong with them. Things are not going right for them. Things are so difficult. Why? Why them? It's not about you. There's nothing wrong with you. It's an event that is out of your control. Very important point before we tackle this challenge, before we deal with it, is to realize that this is really something totally separate from us. Perhaps the Hebrew word for adversity can shed some light as to what it is and what it does to us. The Hebrew word for adversity is tzara. As you know, in Hebrew, every word consists of a root, where this word comes from, which can tell us a lot about what it's doing or how it is acting, how it operates. Tzara comes from the Hebrew word tsar, Tzar means narrow. Well, the simple understanding of it is, yes, a trouble or a tzara limits us. It makes things narrow for us. But there's something else that's hidden in this root. It's not only about narrowing our actions or limiting us in some way, it's also about narrow perspective, narrowing our view. We don't see the whole picture. We think we do. No. The human being does not live long enough to understand or to fathom what's going on with his own life. Less so what's going on in the world. Unless he reads the Torah, unless he has some source where he can glean some information as to what's going on in the world, how will we be able to figure out all that's going on? And life is complex. So when one is not very learned, not very educated in understanding life, then all he sees is a narrow picture. He doesn't see the entire picture, and he's missing out a lot. It may appear to him that something is very, very bad, but if he sees the whole picture, he will realize that in fact it's good. It's not bad. The exact opposite. All he needed to see was a wider angle, a panorama. But we don't live long enough to see everything. So we need to turn to the sources that shed some light, the Torah and the Kabbalah. And the reason I say Torah and Kabbalah is because there is a lot of discussion and a lot of articles about adversity. I'm sure you can find them. I'm sure there are books that have been written by it. And many of these books contain valuable information, no doubt about it. Experience from professionals. What we're doing here is shedding a little bit more light on this problem from the Torah perspective, from the Kabbalistic perspective, in the same way we did with depression, to go into it a little bit deeper as to why these things happen. See, sometimes you may get an explanation, a scientific explanation, how something operates and what it does, but you will never get a why. Science does not provide why certain things happen. They can explain how they happen. Sometimes they can't even explain that. But the why, the root, the source of the problems, and how it's really not a problem, how we just perceive it to be so, for that we need to turn to a higher source. I recommend, by the way, that if you have the time to listen to another lecture, one of the series, the 70 most difficult questions in Judaism, called Why So Much Pain and Suffering? And in that lecture, I go into the various types of painful experiences and sufferings that people have in life, and some tips on how to deal with them, and some explanation as to why they happen. This is more focused on adversity. Adversity is sarot of all kinds, in a more general way, but also a little bit deeper than what I've talked about in the past. So let's begin with what our prophets say about adversity. Shlomo HaMelech, Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived, he says it very clear. Shema beni musar avicha ve'al titosh Torah imecha. Let me see if I can translate it. I'm going to use just plain words to translate what Shlomo HaMelech is saying. It's plain English. Listen, my son, to the discipline of your father. Shema beni musar avicha. Musar means discipline. Musar actually means more than just discipline. It means instruction. It means direction. It means several things. Musar, therefore, is a very, very strong word here. It's telling us that what happens to us in our life is not only to discipline us, to teach us, it's also to direct us. So much happens, so much is going on when a certain event that we call adversity occurs. It's called musar. It's discipline. And you know, Shlomo HaMelech says, you know where this is coming from? It's coming from your father. Obviously, he's talking about one's own father, father and child relationship. Listen to what your father taught you. Listen to the values of that your father had. Carry on with what his faith was. Obviously, that's what his main emphasis is. But the deeper meaning of those words is hearken or listen to the musar of your Father in heaven. Because when we are disciplined in a big way, through all kinds of trials and challenges, they're from above. They're from our Father in heaven. They're just not from another individual. They're not coming from a human being. They're coming from our Father in heaven, from God. And that's a very important point. All right, I will listen. No, that's not enough. You have to be careful what not to do with this musar. There's another verse, another pasuk that reads like this. Be careful. Musar Hashem beni al tim'as. Be careful not to despise the discipline of God and not to abhor his rebuke. For God rebukes the one he loves as a father placates his son. So do not abhor it. Do not detest it. Do not be upset at it. Do not complain. Be careful, because this rebuke, it's coming from God who loves you. So it's not just your father, it's the Father who loves you. It's from God who cares for you. So even though it's a rebuke, and a rebuke is painful, we don't like to be rebuked, but it's coming from your Father, who only means you're good. It's coming from God, who created you, who gave you life, which is the greatest act of love. He brought you into this world. That means he loves you. And he's giving you many, many opportunities and chances. So even the discipline is good. But not everybody takes it that way. Not everybody knows that everything that comes from him is good. This discipline, however, when we talk about discipline, it's not initiated by him. It is triggered from here, down here below, by human beings. We push a button, and that triggers the discipline to come down. It's not that God says, you know what? I'm in the mood of disciplining. I'm going to discipline. No. In order for discipline to come down, in order for a rebuke to be applied in a certain situation, it's because human beings have triggered it, have asked for it. As the pasuk says, "Ki mipi elyon lo tetzeh hara'ot." This is a verse in Icha, Lamentations. From high above, there's no command given for the evil to come down. It's man that triggers the evil, or that which is not good, to come down upon him. Okay, so that's discipline. However, not everything is about discipline. And that is why I want to clarify a very important point. I've had people come to me many times. Rabbi, somebody cast a spell on me. This woman is a witch. Or somebody has an evil eye, an ayn hara, and they gave it to me. These things exist. They're true, but they're not very common. So I don't want to talk about witchcraft now, the impure forces, and evil eye. There's lectures about those separately. What we'll talk about in more general terms is about the more common forms of adversity, and they are, number one, mazal. Some people are born under a certain mazal, which we can, I guess, translate in English into having a certain fate or destiny that has certain difficulties, certain obstacles built into this mazal. What mazal really constitutes is this individual's customized mission, for which he has been given certain tools to accomplish. Those tools are the woman he marries, the friends he will have, the neighbors he will have, the teachers perhaps. God gives us the tools to accomplish our mission. Not everybody uses the tools properly, but we are given the tools, and how to deal with our mazal. Not every mazal is 100% smooth and easy. There's ups and downs. Some people's mazal changes halfway through their life. Some people have it hard. We have the rich, we have the poor, very different kinds of mazal. So when some adversity occurs, if it's only one, or if it's one area of a person's life that is weak, or that one is experiencing trouble, it could easily be attributed to mazal. Why are you saying that it's witchcraft? Why are you saying that somebody cast a spell on you? Perhaps it's just your bad mazal, and I'd rather not even use the word bad. Perhaps this is just your mazal that you're experiencing now, and this is obviously part of your mission. And there's no reason to worry too much about it. There's very little you can do about it because that's your mazal. It's important, therefore, that you have the right perspective, because to change your mazal is not something so simple. To change, because that's your mission. Can you make it somewhat easier? Yes. Attitude is what's going to make it different. One's perspective and one's attitude can make a world of a difference in how one copes with an adversity. What else do we have besides mazal? We have gezerot. There is something called a decree from above. And a decree can be harsh. A decree can be sudden. Doesn't have to happen, but decrees occur. And according to our tradition, they are usually decreed on Rosh Hashanah, the beginning of the new Jewish year. Gzera min hashamayim, as the rabbis call it, is something to take very seriously. The reason for taking it seriously is because Gzerot min hashamayim can be stopped. Those we can change, those we can stop, those we can cancel. So we should pay attention to them. What's an example of a Gzera min hashamayim? When one sees, when one notices that just everything is going wrong. His wife left him. The piping underneath the house, the plumbing, burst, and his living room was flooded. He has 3 root canals the following week. His transmission in the car just blew. And if that wasn't enough, the following week, his neighbor is suing him in court for something. Most people don't have a mazal like that. This is not a mazal. This kind of mazal doesn't exist, that everything is bad. This is gezerot. This is a decree. Now, I want to make sure that you understand that there is an area called guilt. In other words, where a person is guilty for doing something that he should not have done, and because of that he got himself into trouble. I call it guilt. Person smokes 2 packs of cigarettes every day. Obviously, he's going to get himself into trouble, medically, physically. If you steal, you're going to get yourself into trouble with the law and with perhaps even with the person you stole from. So there are things that are not gezerot per se, they're not decrees from above, because they're self-inflicted. They involve a certain guilt, or I guess you're guilty because you're the one that caused it. You're the one that brought it upon yourself. So it's not decreed from above. Still, whether it's mazal or gezerot, I think we can combine the two when it comes to advice and how to properly deal with them, even though they're very different. Rabbis tell us as follows. If an individual does notice that he is being attacked by many, many gezerot, and it was one after another, tzarot ba'ot alav, and this is not a plain mazal, what should he do? The rabbis give us various pieces of advice. I want to focus just on one of them. The more important one. Yifashpesh b'ma'asav. It's time to examine your deeds. If this is not mazal, if this is something you can do about it, then the first step is examine your deeds. Perhaps you did something terribly wrong. What did we say before? We trigger it. If it's a decree, we have triggered it. Perhaps I triggered it. So many troubles, so many things going wrong. What could it be? Examine. An honest individual who examines himself and perhaps gets the help of somebody else who knows him well to examine, perhaps he did something wrong that is causing all these troubles. He may find it and he's able to correct it. Not everyone is able to find the problem. Sometimes it's very difficult. But the rabbis tell us, try. You have to try to examine your deeds. The best way to understand this yefashpesh b'ma'asav, to examine your deeds, is what we have in the newer cars these days. You have sensors, check engine. Some light goes on about oil, about, I don't know, some other problem with the car. I mean, hopefully you will look into it. You will go to the mechanic and repair it. Otherwise, it could be a problem. It could be an accident. It could be worse. So this is a time to check it out. That's what the sensor is for. You're having chest pain. So you just ignore it? Today, many people die from heart attacks. And chest pain is one of the symptoms. There are other symptoms. Look out for them. You can do something about it. It may save your life if you get medical help immediately. Same thing with strokes. There's certain symptoms, certain signs. Well, you may say, well, some people are just lucky. They know to do the right thing, and some people are not lucky. No, it has to do also with educating yourself. Some people have the attitude of just ignoring it and not caring about it, and that's no good. So they are at fault. They are guilty, in a sense. So when we see a sign that's a clear sign, according to our tradition, that is not just mazal, but it's a gezerah, it's a decree, that means that we have been given the ability to do something about it. Perhaps it's not too late. For those of you who have heard the lecture about dreams, sometimes those signals appear in a dream. And it's not necessarily a bad dream. People think a bad dream is bad. Not always. Now, most of the dreams are not real anyway. They're part of our imagination or our experiences. A message through a dream, a prophetic message, does happen from time to time. Sometimes we see those messages a lot in advance. Sometimes within a few days of when something's supposed to happen. Why are they telling this to us in a dream? Well, what was prophecy all about? To give us a chance. A message is sent to us, not via email, not a fax, through a dream. It's a small prophecy. Or through some other means. It could happen in all kinds of ways. We have to pick up on that. Our antennas need to be up. People who understand that God runs the world, they must realize that God is involved. He's not asleep. I mean, he didn't just create the world and bail out. He's around. He knows what's going on. He may not always intercede, but he's around. And messages is something that he does. What is a miracle? A miracle is a powerful way of God showing, I'm around, I'm involved, I protect you. So in the same way that miracles occur and show that God is involved and he's around, so do these powerful messages, and they're very powerful indeed. Tzarot, adversity. It could be a sign from above. I say could be because it could be, it says mazal. But when it's one after another, what else could it be? Usually it's a gezerah. It could be gezerah. Now gezerah, where does it come from? It comes from din. It comes from judgment. That means we are being judged. So what? Can't we appeal it? Yes, you can. But you better do it quickly. Why quickly? Because sometimes if a gezerah is sealed in blood, as the rabbis tell us, it's too late. We don't know, thank God, if it's sealed or not, so we have to try our best. Otherwise, we would give up hope. And not to give up is very, very crucial here. Because it is very, very possible that we may be able to cancel the decree or to stop it. Okay, so what do we do if we examined ourselves and we don't know or we don't see anything? What's the next step? What can we do about it? To pray. Obviously, prayer is important, and we'll get to that. But there's something else that can make a difference. I'm not sure which one is easier. Perhaps prayer is easy, but the next step, even before prayer, something that is very powerful according to the Kabbalah, is to accept the Yisurim, the pain and suffering, mi'ahava. To accept it in a loving way, happily. I accept it. I know where it's coming from. I fully accept it. I'm not going to complain about it. We don't necessarily welcome it. I didn't say that. Mm-hmm. To accept it means to realize that this is for our good. This is out of love. And therefore, I accept it with love. Why is this important? The rabbis tell us, this is in the Kabbalah, that if one is experiencing pain and he truly, sincerely accepts it with love, not complaining about it, that action in itself will sweeten the decree, will sweeten the pain. Sweetening meaning will take away the bitterness, not necessarily in himself, but in his judgment. It's a form of appeal. It's not a real appeal, right? But it's a form of saying, God, yes, I realize I'm guilty. I'm at fault for something, I'm not sure what. Please don't call the jury in. You know, I'm sure if you give me the sentence now, having admitted, you will be compassionate. You know my weaknesses. You know my thoughts. You know exactly what's going on. You know the circumstances. You know, you can of course say I'm sorry for whatever it is. This connection with God, and we haven't gotten to prayer yet, just this connection of confession, of admission, of acceptance with love that this is coming from God, this in itself does has a tremendous effect on the outcome, the ultimate, the final outcome of his judgment. It sweetens it. This in itself, I don't know if it will cancel it, because sometimes a decree has a certain amount of time, and the time has to, you know, expire. When the time expires, the decree will stop. What this could do, perhaps, when we say sweeten, is that it could make it less intense, less painful. Now comes one of the biggest questions of all. To accept it happily, out of love, that's so difficult. How can we go ahead and accept it so easily and say, oh, okay, I accept it. People are suffering, people are having a hard time. How should they accept it? What can we tell them that will make it easier for them to accept it? So here's one idea. The rabbis tell us, and this is again from the Kabbalah, that if one needs to undergo a painful experience because he needs an atonement, for example, for a sin, it's better that we receive it down here below and not above, not upstairs after we leave this world. Upstairs, it can be very, very painful and embarrassing. And in many, many ways, it's definitely preferable, whatever we can get here, to get here and not above, and not upstairs. There was once an individual who came to complain to a big rabbi about all this pain and suffering that he was experiencing, many, many adversities. Financially, he was having a hard time, he was struggling, and in many, many ways, he was having a hard time. And this man was not a righteous individual. He had committed many sins. The rabbi said, let me demonstrate to you how it will be when you get upstairs. You've lived your life, you head upstairs to the heavenly court, and as you're being led to the heavenly court, you will see a whole bunch of wagons, like train wagons, being led to the court with you. And you will ask the angel who are accompanying you, what are all these wagons? He says, all of these wagons are your sins. And he begins to look at all the wagons and says, oh no, all of these wagons are full of my sins. He says, it's a train and it's not ending. And then all of a sudden he turns to his right and he sees more wagons. He says, what are these wagons? Those sins? No. The wagons on your right are all the painful experiences that you had to endure in life. Why are they going to the court? For every one of those wagons, we remove one wagon of sins. Oh, thank God. So he waits to see how many wagons of painful experiences he had, and they're not as many. He says, I want more. Where are they? No, that's it. They're not enough. There's still enough wagons of sins left over. So the rabbi turns to the gentleman and he says, you see, the more you have here, the better. It's not that we want to ask for more. As one rabbi said in the Talmud, Lo meduf shech velo meuktzech. I don't want the bee's honey and I don't want the sting. If I have to get to the honey, if I have to be stung, then I don't want to have the honey. Right? The honey is the reward. The sting is the pain and suffering. Obviously, the pain and suffering does something good to us, but I'd rather not have it, if at all possible. But as one rabbi said, if we only knew the benefit that we derive from every painful experience, we would really ask for more, because it really does a lot for us in the heavenly court. But again, we're not really in the business of asking for this because it's very painful. But if we're already experiencing it, if we're already going through it, then at the very least what we can do is react properly and realize that this is for our benefit, this is for our good. It's a tremendous atonement. It doesn't happen just for no reason. It's not random. It's all directed from above, and it's directed by our Father. It must be something good. It must be for some benefit. So that is one thing that we can relate to, one perhaps idea that can help us. Another idea is as follows. Every challenge, every trial, every struggle is a lesson to be learned. I can guarantee you that the way you will come out of it is totally different than when you went into it. A person will be very, very changed. He will be a different man altogether once he comes out of the painful experience than when he first went into it. It is a learning experience. It's a lesson that he will learn. Let me share with you a quick story about how a big rabbi was able to learn something that he didn't realize. He knew, but he didn't realize how important it was. He was once put in jail, this rabbi, very prestigious rabbi. Somebody accused him of something that was totally false, and he landed in jail. And in this jail, there were other Jewish prisoners, and he saw how they were suffering, how they were away from their families, how they barely ate anything. The conditions were terrible. They were suffering. And there was no mercy. In those jails, once upon a time, you did not have a gym and a TV, right, and a telephone, all the benefits that you have in some jails today. So they were like in a dungeon, and he really felt bad for them. When the rabbi finally came out of jail and says, I know why I landed in jail. He was wondering all along, what did he do wrong? What did we say before? You should examine yourself. He examined himself. What did I do wrong? And then either he realized this on his own or he was told in a dream, Rabbi, you didn't do anything wrong. You know why you landed in jail? So you should see the pain that all these prisoners are going through, that you should commit yourself and take it upon yourself to go out of your way to redeem anyone you can from prison. Pay the ransom, pay the penalties, go there and get them to change their ways so that they can commit themselves to a better life and promise that they will never commit this crime. You had to be there to see how much they're going through so that you should be sensitive to them and want to devote yourself to this cause. Otherwise, He knew it's important to get people out of jail. No, but if you don't spend time with them, you would not know what they're going through. So God sent you to jail just for learning this valuable lesson. Be sensitive towards other people. Realize what they're going through. And perhaps you yourself will become a different person too. Next, prayer, as you said before. Now, why prayer? Is prayer so important? Does it make a difference? We've always said that prayer does something to us too. It definitely humbles us. It definitely allows us to focus on expressing ourselves to God in a very meaningful way, making our requests of Him the most sincere way possible. Obviously, prayer is important, but prayer is not only important, it's powerful. Rabbis tell us it's so powerful that tefillah osa mehzeh. Prayer does half the job. Half the job. In other words, besides examining our deeds, besides taking action to correct a wrong, prayer can actually accomplish a lot, and people do not value it enough. They run through it. They rush through their prayers. They just utter words without paying attention to what they're saying. And it's such a shame. The words that we have in our prayer book, the words that were composed years ago by the rabbis who were divinely inspired, those are powerful words. We're making a connection with God. It's a real strong connection. Morning, afternoon, and evening. And you don't have to wait for a certain hour. You can do it at home too. Use your own words, your own language. Talk to God as though He's your friend, as though He's there with you in the same room. How many people do that? That's partially what meditation, by the way, is all about, but Hasidic meditation. I'm not talking about the meditation where you just yoga in the Himalayas, just silent and concentrating. We're talking about talking, communicating with God. He wants that. Sometimes God holds something back from us, whether it's children or something else, just because He's waiting for us to pray to Him. And that is why the rabbis tell us, Yafa tfilah shel choleh. The prayer of a sick man is looked upon much more upstairs than the prayer from the entire congregation. The whole community is praying for this sick man. Very, very important and very powerful that the whole community is praying. But still, God says, I would prefer that the sick man pray to me. It's His prayer that I'm waiting for. So yes, everybody should pray. There's a certain koach, a certain power to the prayer of the community. The more people pray, there's no doubt about it, it makes a difference. But still, God says, I prefer the sick man's prayer. I want to make a connection. I want him to make a connection with me. And if he doesn't pray, doesn't ask me for anything, it's a shame that he would rely more on the nurse or the doctor than on me. I am the one that gave him the life to begin with. I'm the one that takes it away, if I choose to, not the doctor. But the doctor says that he only has 3 days to live. The doctor decides how many days to live this man has. God decides how many days he has to live. Yes, the doctors can sometimes figure out, true, that the system is about to collapse. Yes, they can see, they have monitors, but God can say no. God can say, I'm giving you a new lease of life. And you know how many times this has happened? That people who were basically told, that's it, you have no chance to come out of this, they got up, they went home, as though nothing happened. The tumor disappeared, all kinds of miraculous stories. It's important to read. I tell my kids, read all this miracle, about all these stories that happened with people all over the world. Be inspired. Because it's true. This is not fake. It's not a novel written by Ernest Hemingway. This is a true story that happened. And the doctors said it was a miracle. If a doctor says it's a miracle, you know what that means? Yeah. So that is why we must never despair. Right now, obviously, I'm talking about a medical problem, a medical situation, because adversity is in the medical field as much as it could be in the financial field. It could be in any kind of field. People go through all kinds of adversities. Prayer applies to all of them. A person can be sued right now. That's an adversity. In jail, it's an adversity. He lost his job, it's an adversity. He's very ill, an adversity. Or he's having trouble with raising his own kids, his own flesh and blood. What did he do? And he didn't do anything wrong. He's a gentle man, and so is his wife. Where did these kids come out from? How did they become so wild? Did they do anything wrong, the parents? Not necessarily. Remember, human beings have free will. Even though there's a saying in many languages, like father, like son, right? Something like that, yeah? Not everyone is like that. You know, there's friends. The friends sometimes have more influence over the child than their own parents. Spending more time in school and on the street than at home. What do you expect? So prayer applies to that too. We have to pray, God, help me. After all, aren't you a partner with the parents? God is our partner in bringing this life into the world. Please be a partner with us in raising this child, in providing for him too. All right, so we covered prayer. What else can we do?
Tzedakah.
Need.
What is that?
Need fast.
Fasting and charity. That is really something that I covered in the other lecture. There are many things that one can do to cancel decrees, but we don't really have the time to go over and repeat. But you're right, there are various mitzvot or good deeds that one can do that hopefully will tip the balance in his favor. So that's very true. Yes.
Changing a person's name that's very sick, how effective is that?
Yeah, the Kabbalists were sometimes involved in changing a person's name or adding a name to him, because that will possibly contribute to a positive energy to his mazal. In other words, the mazal is a mazal that belongs to a certain individual with a certain name, so and so. And if we add a name to him, sometimes that change of name or addition of a name can make a difference, but not all the time. But that is something, you're right, that is something that is also attempted for people who are sick. But here we're talking about adversity in general. So there are all kinds of things that we can do to try to win our day in court, in the heavenly court, to get the decree canceled. But what I want to focus here more than anything else is on the right perspective. Because what we're dealing with is not how to eliminate a decree or how to stop it necessarily, but how to cope with it. That's the title of the lecture. Another thing that we can do that will be normal and expected of us is hishtadlut. Hishtadlut means to make an effort. Let's say somebody's sick, you go to the doctor. You need surgery, you take care of it. What will be after the surgery if it didn't work? At least you did your hishtadlut. At least you've done the normal effort that's expected. You can't just say, well, I leave it to God. No. You are an average individual. You're not a saint that you can just say, God, heal me yourself. No, we go to doctors. We take medication. We have no choice. There are people who are so great spiritually that they trust in God. The average individual needs to make an hishtadlut. Hishtadlut means an effort. What's an effort other than going to a doctor? Let's say somebody's suing you. You may have to hire an attorney. But this one, in this area, you have to be very, very careful. In this area, many, many people make tremendous amounts of mistakes. Whether it's you who are suing or whether it's you who are defending yourself, it makes no difference. Be very careful not to overdo it. People can easily get carried away. I'm going to sue him and I'm going to go after him and I'm going to get every penny from him that he owes me. Or the other way around. You know, you're going to hire all the attorneys in the world to try to defend yourself. If you're guilty, then I can understand you're hiring the best attorney. But if you're not guilty, you don't have to worry as much. You may have to hire an attorney, you may have to get some legal counsel, but don't overdo it. You know how much people end up spending millions and millions of dollars because they don't settle out of court? because they don't try to find an easy resolution through arbitration. They insist on having it their way. They insist on being 100% right and getting every penny. Anytime you're involved in legal matters, be very careful. Rabbis tell us, Al titchok et hasha'ah. If you see the trend, the hour, your mazal going against you, don't push your luck too much. There were people who were going to get 10 years in jail for something they did. But they said, no, I'm not going to admit that I'm guilty. They ended up getting 20. Don't push your luck. If you see that the trend is against you, if you see that there's a lot against you, and you know the truth that you are guilty, don't push too hard. Because you're going to fall and you're going to end up suffering a lot more, losing more money. Lo litchok et hasha'ah. In the Kabbalah, there's a concept called Edna Deritcha, a time where there's tremendous anger in the world, anger from above, where a lot of people are going through a lot of painful experiences. The Holocaust perhaps was such a time, Edna Deritcha, a time where there was tremendous anger, anger from above. Be very, very careful not to stand out. Be very, very careful not to do the wrong thing, because when there's a time of anger, conceal yourself. Try to get away from it, and don't try to fight it. So when it comes to lawsuits, or when it comes to conflicts of any kinds with other human beings, neighbors, and so forth, try to settle. Not only will you save yourself money, you will save yourself aggravation. And more than everything else, more than money and aggravation, people forget the most important thing of all. What Solomon said in Kohelet. The bottom line, one of the greatest achievements in life is a good name, a good reputation. Tov Shem Yeshem and Tov. A good name is worth more than anything else in the world. If your name is going to be besmirched all over the place, and there's going to be rumors and everything, it's not worth it. It's not worth all the money in the world for that. People don't realize that a good name is so valuable. Now, obviously, we can't hold back all the rumors, but don't fight. Don't continue to fight, even if you're right. We're talking about that you're right. If you're wrong, for sure you should not. Even if you're right, try to settle it. Try to get it over with. Don't insist, I'm going to get every penny, it's mine, I'm right. No, it's not worth it. It's not worth the aggravation. Don't you want peace of mind? Don't you want to go on with your life? People, because they care about their money and about their honor and about who knows what else, they insist on being right. They lose a lot more than what they gain. A good name is worth more than all of that, but they forgot about that. People who are really having a hard time should never despair, because we are told that Yeshuat Hashem keheret find, the salvation of God can happen in the blink of an eye. In other words, even if you've tried everything and nothing seems to be working, still don't despair. Despair is not something that you should ever do. People have been underneath the guillotine, and at the last moment, they were spared. My sister's father-in-law, may he rest in peace, was in Auschwitz as a teenager, and they were in the gas chambers, a whole group of young men. So how long before they die? A few seconds. All that was required is for the Nazi to press the button. The last second, an order came, we need a whole bunch of young men to work on the railroad track. Yeah, perfect, you're perfect for this job. A few seconds. They could have given up hope, they could have been broken, heartbroken. Why? If Hashem wants to save your life, He can save your life just like that. And of course, as soon as they came out, within a couple of days, I think it was, the camp was liberated. And they remained alive. Many, many such stories where at the last moment, there was a miracle. Next, what else can we do? This, we spoke at length during the lecture on depression. Bitachon b'Hashem, relying on God, having trust, faith in God. is very, very significant because it reminds us that He's the one that's in control. He is the doctor. We have a prayer, a special prayer of thanks that we say every time we go to the restroom. How we look at our body, the human body, and we're amazed how intricate it is. If God forbid something does not work anymore, if it stops working, we wouldn't be alive. So we thank God that everything is working when we come out of the restroom. And we say the words because He's the doctor that heals those who are sick. And He maintains our health as well. As long as we don't hurt ourselves, of course. Human beings can hurt themselves. So He is the ultimate doctor that we need to turn to. So bitachon b'Hashem, reliance in God, very important idea. And as I mentioned in the last lecture, this is really the master key for helping us deal with all kinds of adversities and troubles. Trust in Him. He knows what He's doing. God does not make mistakes. Could I do anything about it? Yes, perhaps. But trust in Him that after you've tried everything and things haven't changed, it's meant to be that way. That is why we need the following additional step called savlanut, patience. Have anybody over here heard of Abigail Adams? She was a very intelligent woman, famous woman. She was the wife of the second president of the United States, John Adams, who was also a very great, special man. It's a shame that Americans growing up, I'm not an American, and I know about all the presidents pretty much in this country. Each one was a personality, of course, different kinds of personalities we had, but you don't really hear about the wives so much. The women. There were some interesting women too. There were some great presidents in this country, and there were some great women who were married to some of these presidents. She was one of them, Abigail Adams. So let me quote to you what she said. Great difficulties may be surmounted by patience and perseverance. Yes, great difficulties. They're great, but they can be surmounted. In other words, you can overcome them. You can deal with them successfully if you have patience and perseverance. In other words, patience and perseverance will pay off in many, many times. Next idea that can help us very, very much is remembering that Hakol Letovah. Everything is for the good. We began to say how we don't see the whole picture. There is a famous story, I don't recall where it is brought down, in the Midrash or elsewhere, of a man who was carrying a bag of grain home, big bag. And he was dragging it was very heavy. And he didn't realize that there was a hole in this bag. And when he came home, it was 3/4 empty. And of course, he was walking all over the place, and where is he going to go now, fetch all the grain and pick it all up? And so he felt terrible at this loss. It was a tremendous loss. One day he went through the same road that he came, and all of a sudden, this were his field. There's a whole bunch of wheat growing. Where did this all come from? From his grain. What he thought was first a loss turned out to be a tremendous gain. We don't realize that, but many times we may lose $1, $2, $5, and it turns out that when we went back to fetch the $5, we found $100. Or we met up with someone who saw us looking for the money, who ended up giving us a job. So this painful, brief experience, this is a brief experience, turned out to be a very good experience. Patience, wait. You may live long enough to actually see how much good there was in this painful experience. Not always, we don't always see, but sometimes we do get to see. So what's required is patience. And remembering that in the end it's all for the good. There's an Arabic saying, which I very much like, and it's used quite often in certain circles, "Ibad an-nisher uganilo," that the right reaction when facing evil should be, stay away from it and sing to it. In other words, if you can't do anything about it, why worry about it? You need to go on with your life. So keep away from it. It's evil, it's no good. If you can, stay away from that. That which bothers you, that which you disapprove of, but you can't do anything about it, and sing to it. In other words, don't let it bother you. Don't take it to heart. If you can't do anything about it, why worry about it? Worry is only when you can do something about it. I can do something about it, I'd like to do it now, then I worry about it. But if you can't do anything about it, just leave it alone, stay away, keep away from that which is evil, and sing to it. In other words, just ignore it. And look away from it and realize that perhaps something good in the end will come out of it nonetheless. Now I don't see the good, but perhaps one of these days I will. Another important piece of information is to remember that HaKadosh Baruch Hu lo ba b'trunya b'yotav, as the rabbis tell us, God never will give us a load, a burden that we can't handle. Never. You know, people commit suicide, God forbid, because they're running away from their problem. They don't realize that the trouble that they have is surmountable. God will never give us a challenge that is not surmountable, that we can't cope with it. Otherwise, I mean, we would go crazy. No, that's not the point. The point is that if this is a lesson to be learned, if this is an atonement, if there's some benefit to this, it can't be so difficult that it's unbearable. So that's another important idea, is if we are going through a difficulty, we are having a challenge, it's possible for us to carry this burden. It's not unbearable. And last but not least, yes, we are in the 21st century, but let's not forget that we're also in the Messianic era. This is the time of Mashiach. And the prophets already tell us that during the time of Mashiach, there are going to be many, many challenges and difficulties. They will be called tribulations. And they will be characterized as chevlei leida, as birth pangs. A woman goes through a lot of pain many times when she's giving birth. I was even told by someone who had kidney stones that it's similar. You know, kidney stones can be very, very painful, similar to the pain of a woman who was giving birth. Anyway, thank God I did not have kidney stones, and I don't know what it is to give birth. But I know that the women tell me that it's very painful. But wait a minute, is it worth it? The baby comes out. When that woman is holding the baby and nursing it, holding it in her arms and looking at it, I think she forgot about the pain. And that's exactly what will happen when Mashiach comes. There will be birth pangs, very, very difficult times. But these are birth pangs. These are coming from God. A lot of people have had troubles in their life. Many, many people have had difficult childhoods. But they realized later on that it was all for the good. Thomas Edison, I think, is one of the best examples. I mean, there are many people. If you read about people who had all kinds of difficulties in their life, you will see that a lot of them came out of it stronger. Thomas Edison not only came out of it stronger, he always had the belief, great, I made mistakes, good, next time I won't repeat those mistakes. You know, he made a lot of mistakes as he was inventing, you know, discovering all kinds of things. He had a very good attitude, even though he was very challenged, even though he had difficulties. He came out ahead. Yeah. Winston Churchill had difficulties as a child. Even Einstein had some difficulties growing up. These people became great men later on. They were able to overcome those difficulties. They didn't let them, they weren't bothered by it so much. But let's not forget the most important point that we've said so far is that when we think about where these difficulties are coming from, it's coming from someone who loves you. Are you going to be upset at somebody who loves you? When we know that the one who's giving it to us over our head is a true friend, the one that's rebuking us is a true friend that loves us and cares about us, will we be upset at him? He must know what he's doing. He's doing it for our benefit. Just we don't realize, why is this so good? But who's giving it to you? Somebody that knows better than you. Another piece of advice is, if someone is having a hard time, is attach yourself or become friendly with healthy people who have good habits. People will associate with the wrong people. It's only going to make it worse for them. Troubles can become a lot worse if we don't have the right attitude. If we don't cultivate the right attitude, it will be very, very difficult. One has to have the right perspective and have the right attitude to be able to be strong to cope with it. I just want to end with Psalm numbers 121, where David reminds us what to do when one is going through adversity, when one is in trouble, when one is wondering when will help arrive. I will read it to you in English. That I lift my eyes to the mountains, from where will my help come? Not necessarily from the lawyer, not from the doctor, not necessarily from your friend, even though they're all messengers. Each one of those individuals can be a messenger from God. But where is the source of the help? Where will it come from? My help will come from the Lord. My help comes from God. It comes from my Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. Therefore we ask, I jump to the end, that Hashem yishmorcha mikora yishmor nafshecha. We ask that the Lord should guard us from all evil. He should guard our soul. He should guard our going and our coming from now and for all time. The same way that we come into this world, He guarded us, He protected us. He should guard and protect us while we are alive and when we leave this world. There are a lot of important prayers that we pray to God and ask for His protection and so forth. We should not forget their value, not only in prayer and connecting with God, but also for ourselves. We have to be reminded. When we pray, we are being reminded of that power out there of the God. And we're making this strong connection. I really hope and pray that B'ezrat Hashem, very, very soon, another prophecy will come true. And that is, Az yimaleh sechok pinu ulshonenu rina. That very, very soon we will rejoice. Our mouth will be full of laughter and joy and song and praise. Amen. When Mashiach comes and we realize that all that we experienced and endured that was so difficult and painful was just a bad dream. It's a halom. It was just a dream. When we realize what the truth is all about, when we realize the benefits of all of that, and that we will only know with certainty when Mashiach comes. Because then we will see it. Then we will realize it. But in the meantime, we can derive tremendous strength and inspiration from all the valuable sources that we have, from what the rabbis have told us, from what the Kabbalah says, that God loves us, and everything that He does for us is one pure act of God, of goodness. This is, I think, a tremendous strength. We can derive tremendous strength from this fact alone, that people don't realize this. That even though it's difficult, life has many, many hardships of all kinds, there's a lot we can do about it. But don't forget, attitude, perspective is number one. This is coming from Him. This is not man-made, this is not random. Perhaps He's signaling something to me. Perhaps He wants me to get closer to Him. Therefore, all of these experiences have the potential of becoming B'ezrat Hashem valuable lessons. Amen.
Amen.